an image of a beautiful summer's day in a city in America called Denver. And as you can see, the city is starting to prepare for a huge influx of temporarily visitors. And they are coming to the city to see a great speech. And this is the summer of 2008, end of August. And the guy speaking is Barack Obama. And he's here to give his acceptance speech in the Democratic National Convention. And as you can imagine, for a city with a lot of people coming, hotels are fully booked. And so it's a struggle for everybody to find a place to sleep. That summer, and actually the summer before, two guys in San Francisco had a hard time paying their rent. And so they figured that they could rent their living room out to people coming to another conference, to the science conference. And so they put their apartment up on some kind of message board for that conference, and 3 people turned out and they could pay the bill for that month. And they realized, this was kind of clever. And so they turned that into a business. And 3 weeks before Obama talked in Denver, they launched airbedandbreakfast.com, which eventually became the platform we all know as Airbnb. And what so now they've I think they rent about 500,000 beds a day. Of course, it's become huge. And it's this perfect example, or maybe the best example of the kind of access over ownership economy, or the sharing economy, or the collaborative consumption trend, which is one of the biggest trends in the past years, where you have people own something, and then they share it on a platform for other people to use. And to me, there's 3 reasons why this is happening right now. One is money. So people, especially in the US, especially 2008, were struggling to pay their mortgage. And so there was really good timing both with Obama and the economy in the US. The other part is called environment. So why should everybody own their own power tools? Why don't we just use each other's power tools? But the third and maybe most important one is that it's technologically possible to create a platform where people who don't know each other can get together and share their assets. And if you start to look and think about that, and this is also what Airbnb says themselves, I mean, the currency, what they actually do, the currency on their side is trust. So everything in their business is about to create trust between people who don't know each other, to the extent that they lend their most expensive asset to somebody that they don't know. And Airbnb and the collaborative consumption trend is, of course, also part of a bigger kind of servicification trend in our world, where we don't own our CDs, we listen to music on Spotify, we don't own our DVDs, we watch movies on Netflix. And there are, a couple of sayings that keeps repeating. Everything that can be digitized will be digitized. And it sounds like kind of a threat, although it's kind of true, but it's also sounds like a threat to me. And I've been thinking about this because if you think about Spotify, the reason why Spotify exists is because some guys in some garages created Pirate Bay and Napster and YouTube, services like that, and they kind of changed the way that the media industry could do their businesses. And there is this other threat that we keep hearing, which is about innovation that doesn't only change something a little, that changes the playing field completely. And that is talked about as disruptive innovation. So something that really disrupts the way you can do business in an industry. And one thing that happens when you do that, I believe, is that you're acting in gray zones. When you're pushing the boundaries, when you're on the edge of things, you're also touching boundaries. Sometimes it's legal boundaries, sometimes it's social boundaries, but you're really pushing industries and maybe even societies further or outside of their comfort. And I was always happy when that was kind of happening to the big music labels who I didn't like at the time, because they didn't understand that I wanted to listen to my music on an MP3, which they didn't provide. Whatever, you can go bankrupt. We use Napster instead. But what is happening now with disruptive technology is that it's not guys in garages anymore. It's like companies that is massively venture backed. So this is a guy, he's probably very nice, but he was the guy he's the VC guy in suit illustration. His name is Jason Kalakanis, and he runs a great newsletter that I really recommend. But there is something here that I think is super interesting, where we both think about who is kind of being the disruptors. I mean, if it's a person or if it's a big company that has a lot of money behind them. But the other question, which is probably even more interesting, is who's actually being disrupted? Because I can, from my personal perspective, I can think it's okay to disrupt a big multi-billion-dollar stock-traded music company. It's in their role to be able to change with new rules in the game, right? But what's also interesting here is that what used to be fully digital services like Napster or YouTube, we're now seeing that everything that can be digitized will be digitized is happening as a layer on things. So here's another guy. He's one of the founders of Napster, and interestingly, he's now VC. So this is Sean Fanning. So he's a person who made that transition from a guy in a garage to like a big player with money investing in those disruptive companies. And one of the companies he's invested in is this company called Uber that you all know about. I think Uber is super interesting because they really solved a real problem. I mean, cab, going from one place to another in a cab in San Francisco, where they started, used to be a real nightmare. I mean, in this part of the world, it's kind of civilized. You call a taxi and it ends up outside of your place. That didn't really happen in this environment. And so they came up with this app that we all now use, where they connected people who had a car with people who wanted to go somewhere. And that's all great. But the question that is being raised constantly about Uber is that it's good for the customers, but is it good for the drivers? And is it good for the cities? And Uber is in lawsuits like all over the world. They're hunting journalists in very bad ways. And they're kind of treating people who could be very important to them in a bad way. And I like to think of it as to me this becomes kind of a broken promise. When you have something that looks super, super clever, you really, really want to use it, and then only after a while it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And to me, the question of who's being disrupted is key, because when it's companies that is being disrupted, companies that has to make new decisions, come up with new ideas to make their business, it's fine. But when it's people, drivers, cleaners, that is being disrupted, the problem becomes much bigger. And I also think it's interesting that it seems that the time from when you start to when you have to be accountable for your actions is shortening. There seems to be a debate climate, or that people seems to be more and more aware to really look for these things. So it seems that it makes sense for companies to do right from the start. Because it's not okay anymore to claim that, hey, this is just code. I was just developer in a garage doing this, and now, oh, did that happen? Oh, this is just code. That's not okay. It's not okay in the business world. It's not okay in society. So going back to San Francisco again. So this is this beautiful city that we all want to go to. And the best way to experience it is, of course, by renting an apartment on Airbnb, living in this hill, in a real neighborhood. But what is happening in a place like San Francisco, which is essentially an island where it's really hard to build new places, and there's all of these companies that everybody wants to work with, the house market becomes super stressed, and prices go up. And it becomes a really, really good business to own an apartment and rent it out on Airbnb. And so the city wanted to impose a law saying that you can only rent your place out for this amount of days, which is a kind of fair claim, because what's happening in San Francisco is that there's like blocks where there's lots of apartments on Airbnb, which means that neighborhood feeling is kind of being destroyed because the people who are there actually don't live there. So I think that law was kind of fair. But then what happens is that Airbnb invests millions of dollars lobbying against that law. And I think that's a real problem, because all of a sudden they don't acknowledge what's good for their business to have like a real neighborhood, but they don't see themselves in a bigger system. And you could probably make an argument that it's because their venture capital is back. But I don't have any proof for that, but maybe that's part of it. And this all leaves me with this feeling of guilt, because I've spent the last 10 to 15 years promoting innovation, disruption. This is really good things, you know. The record labels, you can go fuck yourself because this is the new thing. So I had this really bitter taste in my mouth. And then I came across a guy called Shawa, who has this beautiful quote where he says that technology wields culture. And he talks about the fact that things seems to be both good and bad when technology hits it. And so I believe that there is really a big need ahead to think about all this, because if digital is a layer on more and more things, a lot more things will be digital, or we will think about them as digital. And of course, there are this huge trend in emerging called artificial intelligence, with technology enabling computers to be more human-like and think for themselves. And there will be robots. There will be decentralized systems based on Bitcoin, where self-driving cars can own themselves and other self-driving cars in systems that they manage themselves, so without humans. And so I believe that we need to be really good at being humans, and we need to take every opportunity that we can to make human arguments like ethics, morale, and all the things that humans are really good at potentially good. At least we're better than the machines, because they're clueless. So we need to take all opportunities we can, both in arguments with businesses, but also with developers and people programming the machines of tomorrow with these artificial intelligence. And to me, this is about kind of figuring out the questions to ask. We know that technology is the answer, but what's the question? And I believe that we need to zoom out and see ourselves beyond the interests that we currently have. The currency in Airbnb is trust. But what about trust outside of that closed platform? I really believe that we need to look at things in a bigger sense. Both create trust within the product, but also outside the product. So essentially what we need to do is that we need to train ourselves to be able to have two thoughts in the head at the same time. Things can be both good and bad. And I think that the debate climate in the world right now is really, really bad for this type of thinking. And it's really, really hard, because we're kind of trained to want things to go one way. But with that guilt in our feeling that innovation disruption isn't that good always, we should think about the possibility of having that things can be both good and bad. And so I want to end with a quote, as you do. It's a guy called Barack Obama, and he, in Hiroshima, some weeks ago, said that technological progress without an equivalent progress in human institutions is useless. So again, it's all about being able to say yes to innovation and disruption, which I really, really do. I believe in it, but also just really think about what it does and what we want it to do. Thank you very much.